The staff said he was asking for you, madam.
The lights of Manhattan glittered outside the window like shards of glass scattered against the black. Inside the restaurant, everything was velvet shadows and golden pools of candlelight, the kind of place where the check never arrived at the table but slipped discreetly onto a black tray, tucked under a leather flap. Claire sat across from him, hands wrapped around the base of her wine glass, watching the man everyone else in the room seemed to orbit around. David Hallstrom, billionaire philanthropist. The kind of man who wore wealth not like an accessory but like skin. Unshakable, seamless, natural. His laugh carried just enough to draw eyes, then dimmed back into private warmth. He was telling her about Paris, a gala in some museum she'd only ever seen in postcards, the way the glass pyramid glowed under moonlight. Claire smiled when he paused, though half of what he said felt like a foreign language. Her son Michael had homework waiting at home. Her work brief was unfinished. Yet here she was in borrowed heels and a black dress bought on clearance, nodding like she belonged in his orbit. Then, a voice brushed against her ear. "Low urgent female, don't trust him." Claire froze. She turned. The waitress, slender, dark hair pinned back, a tray balanced against her hip, was moving past too quickly, too casually. Her lips hadn't quite moved, or maybe they had. "Everything all right?" David's eyes, blue as cut ice, narrowed slightly. Claire forced a smile. "Fine, just thought nothing." He leaned forward, his cufflinks catching the light. "You're distracted." "I'm not," she lied. The whisper clung to her like smoke. "Don't trust him." The food arrived, precise little sculptures on white plates. Claire barely tasted hers. She kept hearing the waitress's voice, sharp, uninvited, like a needle-piercing silk. David was talking about a children's hospital wing he'd just funded. She knew the story already. She'd read about it in the Post, where his picture had been printed like a saint's portrait, smiling, hand resting on the head of a sick child haloed by flashbulbs. "Philanthropy," he said, swirling his wine, "isn't about charity. It's about responsibility. When you have much, you owe much. Don't you think?" Her fork paused midway to her mouth. The words were perfect, polished, but they rang hollow in her chest. "Of course," she said softly. "Tell me about your work," he pressed, eyes intent, as if her life mattered in the same orbit as his. She hesitated. It's nothing compared to what you do. I'm just a legal assistant, filing motions, drafting briefs, background noise." His smile lingered too long. "I don't think of you as background noise, Claire." Something in the way he said it, like he owned the truth of it, made her throat tighten. She excused herself under the guise of needing the restroom. The hallway was narrow, mirrors lined along one side. She stopped halfway, leaning against the wall, heart ticking too fast. "Don't trust him." The waitress was there. She stood by the service door, her tray tucked under her arm, eyes darting nervously. Claire stepped closer. "Did you—" Her voice was a whisper. "Did you just say something to me?" The waitress's lips pressed thin. A flicker of fear crossed her face. "I shouldn't have." "Forget it. No, what did you mean?" Her eyes softened, almost pitying. "He isn't what you think. None of this is what you think. Do you know him?" The waitress shook her head quickly. "I've seen enough. Just be careful." Before Claire could ask more, the woman disappeared through the swinging service door, leaving only the faint clatter of dishes and murmurs from the kitchen. Claire stood there, pulse hammering, her reflection fractured in the mirrors. Back at the table, David was scrolling through his phone. He looked up immediately when she sat, smile resetting like a mask. "You've been gone a while." "Sorry." She reached for her glass, needing something to ground her. He studied her face. "What did you see?" The question startled her. "What do you mean?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "You've got that look. Like you've uncovered a secret. Or you want to. I don't know what you're talking about." He leaned back, relaxed but calculating. "That's the thing about you, Claire. You're curious. It's why I like you. Most women, they just consume. Jewelry, cars, trips. You, though, you ask questions. You want to know how things work." Her skin prickled. How could someone make curiosity sound like both a compliment and a trap? The rest of dinner blurred. Claire answered when spoken to, smiled when expected, but inside the whisper pulsed louder. "Don't trust him." She thought of Michael. His messy hair, his sticky fingers from peanut butter sandwiches, the way he clung to her arm when he had nightmares. She thought of how badly she wanted to believe in something good, in someone who could lift her out of scraping bills and endless late nights. David offered that. Security. Safety. But if the waitress was right, if this man was dangerous, then safety was the last thing he offered. When the check never arrived, Claire realized she hadn't seen the waitress again. Another server brought dessert menus, voice flat, eyes lowered. David insisted on ordering for both of them. Creme brulee for her, espresso for him. Do you always do that? She asked. What? Decide for people. He smiled, amused. Only when I know what's best. Her chest tightened again. By the time they left, Manhattan was soaked in rain, neon lights smeared against wet pavement. David's driver opened the car door. Claire hesitated on the curb, the cold biting through her dress. Everything all right? David asked again, watching her too closely. She forced another smile, the kind that cost her something. Yes. As she slid into the leather seat, she realized the whisper hadn't just unsettled her. It had changed something. Permanently. The ride uptown was quiet except for the rain. Claire stared out the window, the city streaking past, thoughts spinning. She remembered the waitress's eyes, sharp, pleading, afraid. People didn't risk whispers like that for strangers unless they meant it. Unless they'd seen something worth warning about. Don't trust him. David sat beside her, scrolling again, his thumb moving slowly across the glowing screen. His face was calm, beautiful even. But Claire noticed for the first time how still his eyes were. Like glass, she felt the seed take root. Deep and undeniable, and somewhere beneath the fear, a strange and terrible truth settled inside her. She was already in too deep. The first time Claire saw David's yacht, she thought it was a hotel. Gleaming decks, glass walls rising like a skyscraper, lights spilling onto the water, the kind of boat that made the rest of the marina look like children's toys. Welcome to Halcyon, David said, offering his hand as she stepped onto the gangway. His voice carried that practiced warmth, the kind that made everything sound like an invitation instead of a command. Claire forced herself to smile. She dressed carefully, a navy silk dress borrowed from her friend Julia's closet, heels too tall for the dock. Her son Michael clutched her hand wide-eyed at the sight of the massive vessel. It's huge, she managed. David laughed. It's modest. Claire swallowed. The yacht was bigger than her entire apartment building in Queens. They were whisked inside, servants materializing like shadows, one taking her coat, another handing Michael a soda with a straw, another offering champagne. Michael glanced up at her for permission. She nodded weakly. He grinned, sipping his soda as though this new world might actually be his. David watched her watch her son. He belongs here, you know, he said softly. The words made her heart stumble. Dinner was served on the upper deck, the skyline of Manhattan glowing in the distance. Candlelight flickered, wine glasses clinked, laughter bubbled from people Claire had only ever seen in magazines. Politicians, actors, CEOs. They spoke in easy tones about hedge funds and art collections, vacations in places she'd only read about. David kept his hand on the back of her chair, grounding her and trapping her all at once. She's extraordinary, he told someone, his hand brushing her shoulder. Sharp as a blade, beautiful as sin. She keeps me honest. Claire smiled politely, but the compliment burned. Keeps me honest. As though honesty was something that needed keeping. Later, while Michael explored the game room with its glowing screens and velvet beanbags, David led her onto the bow. The night air was cool, the city lights reflecting off the water. Do you like it? He asked. It's a lot, she admitted. He tilted his head. That's not an answer. She met his eyes. It's overwhelming. Good overwhelming. I don't know yet. His smile didn't falter, but his hand tightened around hers. You will. Days turned into a blur. Black tie galas where photographers snapped her picture next to David, always smiling, always leaning in like they were already a story. Charity events where she was seated beside senators' wives and tech moguls, their diamonds catching the light, their eyes sliding over her with polite curiosity. David whispered promises in her ear. Trips to Florence, private schools for Michael, a life without bills and deadlines. You deserve it, he murmured once, his hand brushing her wrist. Let me give it to you. Part of her wanted to close her eyes and sink into it. to believe in the safety of silk sheets and glass towers. But cracks kept showing. Late one night, Claire woke in his penthouse to find the other side of the bed empty. She padded barefoot into the living room only to hear his voice, low, sharp, urgent. "That's not what we agreed. No, you listen to me. If this leaks, we all burn." She froze behind the corner wall, pulse racing, a pause. Then his tone softened, calculated. "Of course. It's handled. It's always handled." When he returned, he smiled as if nothing had happened, pulling her against him. She wanted to ask. She didn't. It happened again. Another night, another call. And again. And then the absences began. Dinners canceled. Meetings that stretched past dawn. His driver dropping her off at home with vague excuses. When she asked, he brushed it off. "Just business," he said, kissing her temple. "What kind of business keeps you up until 3 a.m.? The kind that pays for all this?" His tone was playful, but his eyes weren't. One evening, as she sat on the edge of his bed waiting for him, her phone buzzed. A message from Julia. "Saw the post. You're on page 6. Hallstrom's mystery woman." Her stomach knotted as she opened the link. There she was, hand in David's, stepping off the yacht. A glossy headline, "Who is she?" The article speculated about her background, her job, her son. A single line snagged her. "Sources say Hallstrom's fortune is more precarious than it appears." With whispers of ongoing investigations, she stared at the words until they blurred. When David arrived hours later, she confronted him. "Are you being investigated?" His eyes flickered just for a moment before he laughed. "The press will print anything. Don't read into it. Don't lie to me." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "Claire, look at me." "Do I look worried?" She did. He didn't, and yet she couldn't shake the shadow that had crossed his face. Michael loved him. That was the worst part. When David took him to a Knicks game, Michael came home clutching a signed basketball, his cheeks flushed with joy. He said, "I'm like his son," Michael whispered to her later when she tucked him in. "Do you think he means it?" Claire kissed his forehead, forcing a smile. Maybe, but inside, fear curled tight. What if Michael was part of this performance? What if she was? One night, as they left a gala, photographers swarmed, flashes blinding. Claire clung to David's arm as they were shoved toward the car. In the chaos, she heard a man's voice sharp above the noise. "Hallstrom, how long before the house of cards falls?" David stiffened but didn't respond. The driver shoved them inside the car. Claire's heart pounded. "What did he mean?" "Nothing," David said, voice flat. "Ignore it." But she couldn't, because for the first time she wondered if all of this, the yacht, the galas, the whispered promises, wasn't about her at all. Maybe she wasn't being invited in. Maybe she was being positioned. That night, lying awake in the dark, she realized something. David's wealth didn't feel unshakable. It felt fragile, like a glass tower with cracks running through it. And she was inside it now, whether she wanted to be or not. The first time Claire entered David's study, she felt like an intruder. The room was darker than the rest of the penthouse, lined with bookshelves full of leather-bound volumes she doubted he'd ever opened. A Persian rug stretched across the floor, muted blues and reds that seemed almost too precise to walk on. The desk was enormous, glass and steel, positioned like an altar before the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. David had left for a late dinner meeting. No invitation this time, only a quick kiss and a "be good" tossed over his shoulder. Michael was asleep in the guest room. Silence pooled around her, heavy, expectant. She hadn't meant to snoop. Not exactly, but something about the study pulled her in, as if answers were tucked into its shadows. She started small. A glance at the framed photographs, David shaking hands with presidents, smiling beside actors, a candid shot of him on the yacht with men whose names she vaguely recognized from headlines. Then her eyes landed on the bottom drawer of the desk. Unlike the others, it was locked. Her heart ticked faster. She knew she should leave. But her fingers were already pulling at the drawer, testing it. Locked, yes, but not invincible. She remembered the small toolkit in the laundry room, the one David's housekeeper used for repairs. She moved quickly, quietly, her pulse hammering. It took only minutes to jimmy the lock. The drawer slid open with a whisper. Inside, a black notebook, its cover worn, edges frayed. Ordinary at first glance, but when she flipped it open, her stomach dropped. Pages of numbers, columns and initials. dates scribbled in a hurried but controlled hand. At first it looked like financial data, but too irregular, too coded. Offshore bank names she vaguely recognized, arrows pointing from one account to another. Her eyes caught on an entry, MH 4.2M CI via BVI. She didn't understand it all, but she knew enough. BVI, British Virgin Islands, offshore, hidden. The waitress's whisper echoed in her head. Don't trust him. Claire's fingers shook as she turned another page. There were dozens more entries, hundreds maybe. The amount staggered her. Tens of millions shifted in quiet shorthand, initials that felt like ghosts. Politicians, corporations, judges. She didn't know, but one thing was clear. This wasn't philanthropy. It was laundering, bribery, crime, and David was at the center. Enjoying yourself? The voice sliced through the silence. Claire jumped, slamming the notebook shut. David stood in the doorway, his suit jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened, a smile tugging at his lips. His eyes, though, icy, sharp. I was just looking for... She faltered. For what? He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Something to read? Her throat went dry. This was in your drawer. Yes, he said smoothly. Because it's mine. It's... What is this? She lifted the notebook slightly as if it might burn her fingers. He crossed the room, plucking it from her hands with practiced ease. He didn't even glance at the pages, just set it back in the drawer and closed it. It's business, he said simply. This isn't business, Claire whispered. These are accounts offshore, millions of dollars. What are you doing? He laughed then, low, almost affectionate. Claire, you've been watching too many crime dramas. Do you really think the world runs on balance sheets and taxes? Don't do that, she snapped. Don't make me feel crazy. I know what I saw. David's smile softened, disarming. He reached for her hand. You saw numbers, shorthand. Notes from negotiations you don't understand. That's all. My world is complicated, Claire. You don't need to carry the weight of it. She pulled her hand back. Then explain it to me. He tilted his head, studying her as though she were a puzzle. Explain. Do you ask your boss at the law firm to explain every docket, every case file? No, you trust the system. Trust me, the word hit her like a slap. Trust. Why is it locked away? She demanded. Because it's sensitive, he said smoothly. Because I can't have someone misinterpreting it. Like you're doing now. I'm not misinterpreting anything. I saw millions moving around, David. Who is MH? Who are these people? His smile finally faltered. Just a flicker. Then he laughed again, louder this time, and poured himself a drink from the bar. You think you've uncovered some grand conspiracy, don't you, my little detective? He swirled the glass, ice clinking. But the truth is boring. These are trusts, foundations, money shifting for tax purposes. Perfectly legal. She shook her head. Then why do I feel like you're lying to me? He set the glass down, walked toward her slowly, deliberately. Because you want me to be lying. You want to prove that little voice in your head, right? That waitress, wasn't it? I saw the way you froze that night. She planted something in you. Poison. And now you're looking for evidence to feed it. Her breath caught. So you did hear her. His eyes hardened. I hear everything. Claire's pulse raced. For the first time, she saw him not as the charming billionaire who swept her off her feet, but as a predator. Someone who knew exactly how to twist truth until she doubted herself. I should go, she whispered. Go where? His voice was calm, almost amused. Back to your tiny apartment? Back to working 80 hours a week just to keep the lights on? You want to drag Michael back into that life? Her jaw tightened. He always knew where to press. You don't have to understand everything. He continued softly, stepping close enough that she felt his breath on her cheek. You just have to trust me. Let me take care of you. Of him. That's what you want, isn't it? She wanted to scream, to shove him away, but the words tangled in her throat. Because some part of her, a frightened, exhausted part, did want that safety. He kissed her then, gentle but insistent, sealing the silence. Later, when he left to shower, Claire stood frozen in the study doorway, staring at the locked drawer. She knew what she had seen. She also knew he would never let her see it again. The waitress's warning pulsed in her ears, louder than ever. Don't trust him. For the first time, Claire believed it fully. And for the first time, she understood. David's empire wasn't untouchable. It was fragile, and if she wasn't careful, She'd be crushed in the collapse. The penthouse was too quiet. Claire had put Michael to bed in the guest room hours earlier, tucking him under sheets softer than anything he'd ever known at home. David had stepped out for a late call, leaving her alone with the glittering silence of a place that didn't feel like hers. She should have gone to bed. She should have stayed in her lane. But the silence pressed in, suffocating, and her eyes drifted toward the double doors at the end of the hall, the study. She hesitated only a second before pushing them open. The room felt different from the rest of the penthouse, less curated, less showy. Bookshelves lined the walls filled with volumes she doubted David had ever read. The heavy Persian rug muted her footsteps. The desk was sleek glass and steel, facing the Manhattan skyline like a throne overlooking a kingdom. She stepped closer, fingertips brushing the polished surface, papers neatly stacked. A pen aligned perfectly with the desk's edge, nothing out of place except her eyes caught on the bottom drawer. It was locked. A shiver ran down her spine. People didn't lock things unless they had something worth hiding. She should have walked away. But something, the waitress's whisper, the flicker of unease that never left her, pushed her forward. In the laundry room, she remembered seeing a small repair kit the housekeeper kept. She retrieved it, hands trembling as she dug out a thin tool. Back in the study, she crouched, pried, and coaxed. The lock clicked open with a soft snap. Her breath caught. Inside lay a single notebook, black leather, worn at the edges as though handled often. She lifted it out carefully, almost reverently, as if it might explode. The pages were filled with numbers, handwritten columns, initials, arrows, dates. Offshore banks she recognized in fragments: Zurich, BVI, Cayman. Her throat went dry. One entry leapt out at her: MH, 4.2M, CI, via BVI. She didn't understand it all, but she knew enough. Transfers, shell accounts, hidden fortunes. This wasn't philanthropy. This was something else, something criminal. She turned page after page, scanning frantic handwriting. Names reduced to initials, trails of millions shuffled across borders, bribery, laundering, collusion. She couldn't prove it yet, but every line reeked of corruption. The waitress's voice echoed in her head. Sharp as glass, don't trust him, enjoying yourself. Claire's heart lurched. David stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, jacket off, tie loose. His smile was easy, almost amused, but his eyes were knives. She snapped the book shut, guilt searing her. I was just looking for what? His voice was silk-stretched thin. A bedtime story? I found this. She held the notebook weakly, like evidence she wasn't ready to own. He crossed the room, plucked it from her hands with infuriating calm, and set it back in the drawer. He slid it shut, locked it. It's business, he said simply. Business? Her voice cracked. Those are millions of dollars moving through offshore accounts. That's not business, that's complicated, he interrupted smoothly. He poured himself a drink from the bar cart, amber liquid catching the light. The kind of complicated you don't need to worry about. Don't do that, Claire snapped, surprising herself. Don't make me feel crazy. I know what I saw. He turned, glass in hand, his smile softening into something almost tender. You saw numbers, shorthand, internal notes from negotiations you wouldn't understand. It's boring, Claire, dull. If you were a banker, you'd yawn. Then why lock it away? His eyes glittered. Because misinterpretations are dangerous. Like this one. Her chest tightened. Who's MH? Who are these people? For the first time, his smile faltered just for a second. Then he laughed, shaking his head. You're adorable when you play detective. Don't condescend to me. He stepped closer, voice lower now, intimate. Claire, do you really think you've stumbled onto some grand conspiracy? My little legal assistant with her clearance rack dresses? You think you see the whole picture? The words cut, cruel and precise. She swallowed hard. I think you're hiding something. David sighed as though weary of a child's tantrum. This is why I didn't want to bring you too far into my world. It's messy. It's misunderstood. But I chose you because you're different. You don't care about yachts or jewelry. You care about Michael, about building something real. Let me give you that. Don't ruin it by doubting me. Her mind spun. He was flipping it, turning her fear into ingratitude, her discovery into paranoia, gaslighting her so smoothly it almost worked. Almost. I should go, she whispered. His smile returned, gentle now. Go where? Back to that apartment with the leaky radiator? Back to scrambling for rent? You want that for Michael? Her chest ached. He always knew where to strike. You don't need to understand every detail, he murmured, reaching out, thumb brushing her cheek. You just need to trust me. That's all. Trust. The word rang in her ears like a curse. He kissed her then. Slow. Deliberate. A ceiling of silence. She let him, though her stomach twisted. When he finally pulled back, he whispered, "Stop looking for monsters. You've already found your hero." And with that, he left the study, his footsteps steady, confident. Claire stood rooted to the rug, staring at the locked drawer. She wasn't crazy. She knew what she'd seen, but now she also knew something else. He would never let her see it again. The waitress's warning echoed louder than ever. Don't trust him. And for the first time, Claire saw David not as the man who could save her, but as the predator who could destroy her. His empire wasn't invincible. It was fragile, built on lies and ledgers, and if the wrong truth slipped out, it would all collapse, burying her and Michael with it. The sheets were cold when Claire reached across the bed. David's side was empty again. She stared at the ceiling, shadows shifting in the city glow that seeped through the penthouse windows. Sleep never came easily here. Not with Michael down the hall, not with the secrets humming in every corner of this place. Tonight, she couldn't fight the urge. She pulled on her robe and padded barefoot through the hall. The silence was heavy, the kind that pressed against her chest. David's study door was slightly ajar. Her pulse quickened. Inside, the room glowed faintly from the desk lamp. She stepped closer, careful not to make a sound. A small black device blinked on the edge of the bookshelf. She frowned, leaning in, a recorder. She reached for it, fingers trembling, and pressed play. Her voice filled the room. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then explain it to me." "Don't gaslight me." "David," her stomach dropped. Their conversations, recorded. She spun, scanning the study. Another device hid behind a vase, one under the edge of the desk. A small red light winked at her from the bookshelf across the room. He wasn't just recording her in here. He was recording her everywhere. Her breath came shallow as she pulled open the drawer she'd unlocked before. The ledger wasn't there this time. Instead, a new stack of folders filled the space. She hesitated, then slid one free. Inside, photographs. Crisp, high-resolution shots of men in suits. Judges. She recognized one from a headline. A federal judge who'd presided over a massive corporate fraud case. Attached were envelopes. Inside them, receipts, transfers, gifts, cash, bribes. Her stomach twisted. This was how David's empire stayed intact. Not by luck, not by brilliance, but by corruption stitched into the highest levels of power. She shoved the folder back, her hands shaking, bile rising in her throat. Couldn't sleep? She froze. David stood in the doorway, shirt unbuttoned, tie hanging loose around his neck. His voice was soft, almost teasing. Her throat tightened. "You're recording me." His smile barely shifted. "I record everything. Why?" "Because memory is fallible. People twist words. Evidence doesn't." He stepped further into the room, closing the door with a gentle click. "And you, Claire, you've been twisting a lot lately." Her pulse pounded. "You bribe judges." He chuckled, shaking his head like a parent indulging a child. "Such a dangerous word. I prefer loyalty incentives." Her voice rose. "You're controlling everyone. Even me." He moved closer, voice low. "And yet you're still here." Claire backed away, her shoulders hitting the desk. "You can't do this. You can't monitor me, record me." "Can't." His eyes darkened. "You think there are rules in my world?" "There aren't. There's leverage, and I have all of it." "Not Michael," she whispered. Something flickered across his face, a smile, sharp, deliberate. "Michael is the reason I'm keeping you close. Don't you understand? He ties you to me. He ties me to the future." Her blood turned to ice. "What are you saying?" He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. "I've been restructuring my holdings. A guardianship clause. If anything happens to me, certain assets fall under your management on Michael's behalf. It makes him the collateral, the safeguard." Her knees nearly buckled. "Collateral? He's a child, not a pawn." David's hand brushed her cheek, gentle and terrifying all at once. "Every king protects his throne, Claire. Sometimes that means moving pieces you'd rather keep off the board. She shoved his hand away, fury cutting through fear. You're sick. No, he murmured. I'm prepared. There's a difference. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You used me. You're using my son. He sighed, almost disappointed. You're being dramatic. I gave you everything. Comfort, security, a life your son could only dream of before me, and now you spit on it because you saw some numbers you don't understand. I understand enough. He studied her for a long, tense moment. Then softly, do you? Because I don't think you realize how dangerous it is walking away. You know too much now. Too much to be safe, her chest constricted. Is that a threat? It's a fact. His voice was calm, steady. People disappear when they become inconvenient. I'd hate for that to happen to you. Or to Michael. The words landed like a blade. For a moment she couldn't breathe. She thought of Michael asleep down the hall, his small chest rising and falling, blissfully unaware of the danger wrapping itself tighter around them. Her fury burned through the fear. If you ever touch him... David raised a hand, silencing her. Relax, he's precious to me. More than you know. Which is why you should stop fighting me. Stop doubting. Accept what's in front of you. It's safer. For both of you, his tone was soft, coaxing, but beneath it was steel. Claire swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay steady. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't beg. You're a monster, she whispered. He smiled faintly, as though amused. No, I'm inevitable. Then he turned, leaving the study, leaving her in the silence that suddenly felt like a cage closing around her. Claire sank onto the desk chair, her body trembling. The betrayal wasn't just that he lied. It wasn't just that he bribed, recorded, manipulated. It was that he had woven her son into his empire, tying them both to his crimes like anchors. She thought of the waitress's warning, of the whisper that had started it all. She hadn't understood then. But she did now. She wasn't dining with a savior. She was sleeping beside a predator. And the walls of his empire weren't protecting her. They were prison bars. The subway car rattled beneath Claire, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. She pulled her coat tighter, keeping Michael's small backpack pressed to her chest like a shield. Every sound made her flinch. The squeal of brakes, the shuffle of strangers, the faint ding of a phone. David's reach felt everywhere. She hadn't told him she was leaving the penthouse tonight. She had lied, said she needed air. A walk to clear her head. Her stomach still twisted at the memory of his look, soft, knowing, as if he didn't believe her but allowed her the illusion. Now she was on her way to someone she hadn't seen in years. Someone who had once told her, if you're ever in trouble, call me. No matter what. Jack Moreno had been her classmate in law school before she dropped out to raise Michael. He'd gone on to become an assistant district attorney, tough, sharp, relentless. He also carried scars. David Hallstrom had humiliated him in court once, years ago, with an army of lawyers and bottomless resources. If anyone would listen now, it was Jack. She found him in a small bar near the courthouse, hunched over a whiskey. His hair was thinner, his face harder, but his eyes lit with recognition when she slid into the booth. Claire? He blinked. Jesus, it's been, 8 years? Too long. Her voice was brittle. He studied her face, then frowned. What's wrong? She leaned in, lowering her voice. It's David Hallstrom. Jack froze. His jaw tightened. That bastard? She pulled the folded pages from her bag, notes she'd copied from David's ledger in the stolen minutes before he'd locked it away again. Offshore transfers, initials, dates, not everything but enough. Jack scanned them, his eyes narrowing. Do you know what this is? Money laundering, bribery, I don't know the full scope, but it's billions. Jack let out a low whistle. Claire, if this is real, it's dynamite. But it's also a death sentence. You understand what he'll do if he finds out you're helping me? She met his eyes, steady despite the tremor in her hands. He's already watching me. Recording me. He said if I walked away, Michael wouldn't be safe. Jack swore under his breath. He threatened your kid? Her throat tightened. Not in words, worse. He said Michael's part of his empire now, collateral. For a moment, Jack was silent. Then he slammed his fist against the table, rattling the glasses. That son of a bitch. They talked for hours, whispering like conspirators. Jack explained what it would take, subpoenas, warrants, insiders willing to flip. Claire explained how careful David was, how paranoid. The ledger wasn't just notes. It was his insurance policy, coded in a way only he fully understood. But if we can prove these transfers connect to bribes, Jack tapped the paper, we can build a case. He's not untouchable. Claire shook her head. You don't know him. He's always 3 steps ahead. If he senses even a hint, then we play it smart, slow, invisible. Leaving the bar, Claire felt a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. But it was fragile, like glass she dared not drop. When she returned to the penthouse, David was waiting in the living room, sprawled across the leather sofa, a drink in his hand. You're late, he said softly. Claire's heart pounded. I went for a walk. In heels? His eyes flicked to her shoes. She forced a smile. Sometimes I like the sound. His gaze lingered, sharp, searching. Then he chuckled and rose, brushing past her with a kiss to the temple. Don't get lost out there, Claire. The city can be dangerous. The warning lingered in the air long after he disappeared down the hall. That night, she crept into Michael's room. The boy stirred as she sat on the edge of the bed, his hair a dark halo against the pillow. Mom, he mumbled sleepily. Shh, she stroked his cheek. Go back to sleep, sweetheart, but she couldn't stop herself. The words poured out, raw, whispered against the quiet. I promise you, Michael, I will keep you safe, no matter what it takes. I don't care how powerful he is or how much he thinks he owns us. He doesn't, not you. Not ever. Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. I'm going to fight him. For you, for us. He'll never use you as a pawn. I swear it. Michael's small hand reached out blindly, curling around hers. He was half asleep, unaware of the weight she was putting into the moment, but his touch steadied her. For the first time since the waitress's warning, Claire felt something stronger than fear. Resolve. She would not be a pawn. She would be a warrior. And David Hallstrom had no idea what kind of war he had just started. The sirens faded, leaving only the hum of fluorescent lights. Claire sat on the curb outside the wrecked taxi, shaking uncontrollably. Shards of glass glittered in her hair. Paramedics hovered, asking if she needed to go to the hospital, but she kept repeating, I'm fine, though her hands wouldn't stop trembling. It wasn't an accident. She knew it in her bones. The driver had sworn the brakes failed, but the way the black SUV had appeared out of nowhere, swerving just enough to force them into the intersection, it was too precise. Too deliberate. David. He was sending a message. I can end you whenever I want. That night, back in the penthouse, she sat in the dark, staring at her reflection in the window. Her face was pale, her eyes wild. She saw not herself but fragments of the woman she used to be, the one who had sworn she would never be trapped again. And suddenly, she was back there. Flashback, 10 years earlier. The apartment smelled of whiskey and sweat. Jason, Michael's father, loomed over her, fists clenched. You spent my money on diapers? Again? It's our son's money, Claire whispered, clutching the baby tighter. Jason's laugh was a snarl. The slap came fast, ringing across her cheek. You think you're better than me? You think you can leave? She remembered the bruises, the endless nights waiting for him to stumble home, never knowing if he'd collapse or explode. She remembered scraping together coins to buy formula, pawning her mother's bracelet to keep the lights on, and she remembered the day she finally ran. Michael, barely a year old, his small body bundled in a blanket as she boarded a bus to nowhere with $32 in her pocket. The years after were survival. Scrubbing offices at night, typing depositions in borrowed apartments, every step a claw upward, building stability inch by inch until she could finally breathe. She had promised herself, never again. Never another man who could take everything from me. And yet here she was. Present David wasn't Jason. He didn't need fists. He had wealth, power, connections that could erase her with a signature. The betrayal cut deeper because she had trusted again. She had let Michael near him. She had let herself believe in safety. Her reflection blurred as tears burned her eyes, but beneath them something else stirred. Not weakness, not defeat. Steel. She had survived worse, and she would survive this. The next morning, she called Jack from a payphone 2 blocks from the penthouse. She didn't dare use her own phone. They tried to kill me, she said without preamble. Jack's sharp intake of breath carried through the line. Jesus, how? Car crash, but it wasn't random. She paused, glancing over her shoulder. He wants me scared. He's escalating. Jack's voice hardened. Claire, we need to move faster. Get something solid. Something a judge can't ignore. Her throat tightened. If we push too fast, he'll know. And Michael, we'll protect him, I swear. But she'd heard promises before. She'd learned how fragile they could be. That night, Claire tucked Michael into bed. He clung to her arm. Mom, why do you look sad? Her heart cracked. I'm not sad, baby. Just tired. You work too much. Maybe. She kissed his forehead. But everything I do for you. He smiled, drowsy, unaware of the storm around them. Watching him, she felt the weight of her past pressing in. Jason's rage, the years of struggle, every scar carved into her skin and memory. They all led here. She refused to let Michael inherit that pain. Later, she returned to the study. David was out again, where she never knew. She moved with quiet precision, checking corners, searching for cameras she hadn't spotted before. Her fingers traced the edges of picture frames, the underside of the desk, the grooves of the bookshelf. A tiny black dot blinked faintly. Another recorder. She ripped it out, breathing hard. One by one, she collected them. Some she crushed under her heel, others she stuffed into her pockets. Each one felt like reclaiming a sliver of herself. In the silence that followed, memories surged again. Flashback. 6 years earlier. Michael's cough had been worsening. She had taken him to the ER, terrified, only to be handed a bill she couldn't pay. The doctor had looked at her like she was invisible, just another single mother with too much need and too little cash. She remembered standing in the parking lot after, sobbing into her hands, while Michael whimpered in the stroller. That was the night she vowed, he will never know how fragile the ground beneath us is. I will give him more. I will fight for more. That vow had led her to law school, to working late nights as a legal assistant, to clawing her way into a seat at tables she was never invited to, and it had led her here, to David Holstrom. She saw now the cruel irony. She had fought to escape one kind of cage, only to step willingly into another. The sound of the penthouse door unlocking jolted her back. Claire shoved the broken devices into the trash and smoothed her hair just as David entered, smiling as though nothing were wrong. Long day, he said, tossing his jacket over the sofa. You should have called. We could have had dinner together. Her chest tightened, but she forced a smile. Maybe tomorrow. He studied her, his gaze sharp. You're distant. I'm tired. He leaned in, kissed her forehead. Rest then. You'll need your strength. The words lingered long after he retreated down the hall, weighted with menace. That night, Claire lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She could still hear the screech of tires, the shattering glass, the echo of Jason's voice from years ago, sneering that she would never make it without him. But she had. She'd made it this far, and she would go further. Fear had ruled her once. Fear had trapped her. But this time, fear would be her fuel. David wanted her broken. Instead, he had awakened something far more dangerous, her resolve. The waitress's whisper replayed in her mind like a drumbeat. Don't trust him. She thought of Jason, of the bruises, of the years scraping for survival, of the accident that could have ended her life tonight. And then she thought of Michael, safe in the next room, dreaming of things she was determined he would one day have. She whispered into the dark, fierce and unshakable. You won't win, David, not this time. Not ever. This chapter weaves trauma flashbacks with the present-day accident, showing how Claire's scars deepen her resolve. She moves fully into fighter mode, no longer only a pawn. Would you like me to expand Chapter 7, The Threat Escalates Guard, next, where David's tactics grow violent and Claire begins actively striking back? Or pause so you can adjust how extreme you want his retaliation to become? You said, Chapter 7, The Courtroom Theater. Word count 1-200, the trial begins. David sits smug in his tailored suit, his legal team armed with intimidation and spectacle. Claire takes the stand, her voice trembling but unbroken as she details the secrets she uncovered. The courtroom becomes a theater of power. Gaslighting, intimidation, and manipulation collide with truth, courage, and raw emotion. Every cross-examination feels like a knife twisting, but Claire refuses to break under the billionaire's gaze. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and stale coffee. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the packed gallery hummed with tension, the kind that made every whisper feel amplified. David Hallstrom sat at the defense table, tailored navy suit immaculate, silver cufflinks flashing. He looked less like a man on trial than the host of a gala. His mouth curved in that infuriating half-smile, as though the entire proceeding were a performance staged for his amusement. Claire forced herself not to look at him. Jack leaned in. "Remember, breathe. Don't let them corner you. You've got this." She nodded, but her hands trembled in her lap. Her reflection in the pitcher of water looked pale, fragile. She wasn't a warrior here. She was a witness, and she knew how easily David could unravel her with a single glance. When the judge called her name, Claire rose on unsteady legs. Each step to the witness stand felt like climbing through quicksand. She swore the oath, voice barely above a whisper, and sat. The wood of the chair was unforgiving against her back. Jack began gently, his tone steady, anchoring her. "Miss Turner, can you tell the court how you came to know Mr. Hallstrom?" She took a breath. "I met him at a restaurant. He seemed generous, charming. He told me he wanted to help me, to help my son." Her throat tightened, but she pressed on. "At first I thought he was saving us. But then—" Jack nodded. "Go on," she swallowed. "I found records, a ledger. Notes of financial transfers, millions, hidden through offshore accounts. And then I realized he was bribing judges, politicians, anyone who could protect his empire." Gasps rippled through the gallery. David didn't flinch. His eyes locked on hers, cold, steady. Jack held up a photocopy of her notes. "Is this the document you copied?" "Yes. And in your own words, what does it show?" Claire leaned forward, voice firmer now. "That David Hallstrom's fortune isn't philanthropy. It's fraud. It's crime. He built his empire on lies, and he threatened to use my son as collateral to protect himself." The courtroom erupted. The judge's gavel hammered for order. Through the chaos, David's smile sharpened just for her. When Jack finished, the defense rose. A tall man in a pinstripe suit approached, Marcus Kane, known for dismantling witnesses piece by piece. He adjusted his cufflinks, eyes narrowing on her like a predator sighting prey. "Miss Turner, you say you found this so-called ledger, yes?" "Yes." "Hidden in Mr. Hallstrom's study?" "Yes." "Locked in a drawer you had no right to open?" Claire's pulse spiked. Yes. So you broke into his private files. Answer the question. You broke in, didn't you?" Her voice wavered. "Yes," Marcus paced slowly. "So, your entire testimony rests on information you obtained illegally. Information you may have misunderstood, yes?" "No, I know what I saw. You're not a banker. You're not an accountant. You're a legal assistant who never even finished law school. Correct?" The word sliced, cruel. Claire's chest tightened. "Correct." Marcus turned to the jury, eyebrows raised as though the point was already won. Then he struck deeper. "Ms. Turner, you've been in financial difficulty before, haven't you? Struggling to pay bills? Living paycheck to paycheck?" Jack objected, but the judge allowed it. Claire clenched her fists. "Yes. And isn't it true that Mr. Hallstrom supported you? Provided for you and your son? Offered you stability you didn't have?" She swallowed hard. "Yes. And now you sit here trying to destroy him. Why, could it be resentment? Jealousy? Or maybe leverage?" Her stomach twisted. Marcus leaned closer, voice silk and poison. "Maybe this isn't about justice at all. Maybe it's about money. You'd do anything for your son, wouldn't you? Even lie?" Gasps again. Claire's vision blurred with tears. David's gaze burned into her, smug, certain she would break. She inhaled sharply, and for a moment she was back in Jason's apartment, bruised and terrified. She remembered the vows she had made. She remembered the crash, the glass in her hair. Michael's small hand clutching hers as he slept. No more fear. She steadied her voice. "You're right. I'd do anything for my son. I've scrubbed floors, skipped meals, begged landlords, anything. But I won't lie. Not for him. Not for anyone. The truth is, David Hallstrom used me. He used my child. And he thinks he's untouchable. But I am not here for money. I'm here because if I stay silent, he'll do to others what he did to me." The room went still. Even Marcus hesitated, thrown off balance. Jack rose. No further questions, the judge excused her. Claire stepped down, her legs shaking but unbroken. She didn't look at David until she reached the aisle. Then she did. His smile was gone, and in his eyes, for the first time, she saw something that almost looked like fear. The air inside the courtroom crackled like a live wire. Jack rose, a stack of papers in his hand, his face taut with restrained triumph. "Your Honor, we move to enter into Evidence Exhibit 47, the ledger of David Hallstrom, authenticated through forensic analysis of handwriting, ink, and metadata from the original file." A murmur swept the room. Jurors leaned forward. The judge's brow lifted. David adjusted his cufflinks. But his smirk faltered when the oversized projection screen lit up. Page after page of coded transactions, initials and offshore accounts flashing into view. Jack's voice rang out. "These aren't mere notes. These are instructions. Billions laundered through shell companies, routed through Zurich, the Caymans, the Virgin Islands. And here," he pointed, his tone sharp, "payments flagged to sitting judges, campaign committees, even foreign ministers." The gallery gasped. Reporters scribbled furiously. Claire's heart hammered. It was all here, the rot beneath David's empire laid bare. Marcus Kane shot to his feet. "Objection. This so-called ledger is inadmissible. Fruit of the poisonous tree." The judge frowned. "Objection overruled. Continue." Jack didn't miss a beat. He advanced on the witness stand where a forensic analyst sat. "And to confirm, you verified this notebook belonged to Mr. Hallstrom?" "Yes," the analyst replied. "We matched his handwriting samples, his digital timestamps, and his financial accounts." "The ledger is authentic," the jury whispered, eyes flicking to David. And that was when the mask slipped. David stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the floor. "This is bullshit." His voice boomed through the chamber. "Those numbers mean nothing. Do you all think you're smart enough to understand the scale of my work? I built hospitals. I rebuilt entire neighborhoods while your government sat on their hands. And now you want to crucify me for keeping the machine oiled?" The courtroom erupted in chaos. The judge's gavel slammed. "Order, Mr. Hallstrom, sit down." But David wasn't finished. His face flushed, his polished composure cracking. He pointed at Claire, his voice venomous. "She's nothing. A parasite, a pathetic single mother who clawed her way into my bed because she saw a chance at the good life. You believe her?" Claire flinched but held her gaze steady. The jury saw it. The arrogance. The violence simmering beneath his charm. Jack leaned close to Claire, whispering, "He's unraveling." This is good. But the pit in her stomach said otherwise. 2 days later, the high wore off. Jack called her into his office, his expression grim. "We've got a problem." Claire's chest tightened. "What kind of problem?" He slid a file across the desk. "Inside an affidavit, the original ledger," he said quietly. "It's gone. Disappeared from evidence storage." She blinked, uncomprehending. "What do you mean, gone?" "You had it locked under chain of custody. Someone leaked its location. It was stolen last night." Her pulse roared in her ears. No, we still have the copies, the scans." Jack hesitated. "Not enough. Without the original, Kane will argue fabrication. And the jury, well, the impact is gone." Claire's throat closed. Who leaked it?" Jack didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, his jaw tight, and then she saw it in his eyes. "Jack," she whispered, Don't tell me it was you." His silence was confirmation. Claire staggered back as though struck. "You? You've been fighting him for years?" "Why?" Jack's voice cracked. "Because he got to me, Claire. Do you know what it's like going up against someone who owns judges, senators, CEOs? He reminded me I have a family too, kids, a mortgage. He doesn't threaten, he promises. And he always keeps promises." Her stomach twisted. Betrayal was a blade she knew too well, but this cut deeper. "So you sold me out?" she said hoarsely. "You sold Michael out." Jack slammed his fist on the desk. "I'm trying to keep us alive." "No," she hissed, her voice shaking but sharp. "You're keeping yourself alive. There's a difference." She stormed out, the city air slapping her face as tears blurred her vision. Every sound felt too loud. Car horns, footsteps, sirens. She wanted to collapse, to give in. But the memory of Jason's fists, of the crash, of David's whisper that Michael was collateral, those ghosts shoved her upright. This wasn't just about evidence. It wasn't just about winning a case, it was about Michael's future, and she refused to surrender. The next day in court, Claire sat stone-faced as Kane preened before the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, notice the prosecution cannot produce the original ledger. We are left with blurry scans, questionable handwriting, interpretations from a witness who, need I remind you, admitted she broke into private property. This entire case rests on hearsay and theft. He smirked. And you're expected to convict a man who's done more for this city than any mayor or senator? The words washed over her like acid. But when David's gaze sought hers triumphant again, she met it with steel. Yes, the case was wobbling. Yes, betrayal had gutted her. But she wasn't done. Not yet. A mother doesn't stop fighting. That night, back in the penthouse, Claire whispered into Michael's hair as he slept. They can burn the evidence. They can twist the story. But they can't take you. They can't take the truth. Her voice cracked, but her resolve only sharpened. I'll find another way. I swear it. Outside, the city roared, oblivious, but inside, a war raged, and Claire had already chosen her side. The city didn't sleep, but tonight Claire felt the world hold its breath. She sat in her apartment, the glow of her laptop reflecting off her tired face. Michael was asleep in the next room, his soft breathing a reminder of why she was still standing. In her hands lay the final weapon, a drive with everything David thought he'd destroyed. Not the original ledger, that was gone, but copies, screenshots, audio snippets she'd hidden in places no one thought to look. A ghost trail he couldn't erase. She hovered over the send button. Once she pressed it, there would be no going back. The documents would land in the inboxes of 3 investigative reporters, each hungry for blood, each owed a favor. Her finger trembled, but her resolve did not. She clicked. The files flew into the ether, and in that instant, Claire knew David's empire had just been set on fire. By morning, the headline screamed, "Billionaire Hallstrom linked to global laundering scheme." Bribes, blackmail, and offshore fortunes, the secret ledger exposed. Power players scramble as Hallstrom case deepens. Cable news anchors dissected every transaction. Talk radio buzzed with fury. On Twitter, hashtags blazed like wildfire. Hallstrom lies in your billionaire blood, your justice for Claire. Claire sat in a cafe across from the courthouse, a cap pulled low over her hair. She sipped bitter coffee as the screens mounted on the wall replayed David's face over and over, his carefully crafted smile now a mask for scandal. Commentators speculated about his downfall. Senators issued carefully worded statements, and one by one, the names in the ledger scrambled to distance themselves. David was radioactive now, and Claire didn't need to say a word. Inside the courtroom, the shift was palpable. David walked in still dressed to perfection, but the swagger was gone. Reporters shouted questions at him, questions he ignored, jaw clenched, eyes shadowed. His legal team whispered furiously, their confidence cracked. Even Marcus Kane, ever smooth, looked rattled. Claire watched from the gallery, silent. The prosecution didn't need theatrics anymore. The media had done what the trial couldn't, turned the public tide. Jurors sat stiffer, their eyes sharper, aware that the man before them wasn't just a defendant, he was a symbol of corruption eating the city alive. Jack avoided her gaze. Shame radiated from him like heat. Good. Let him drown in it. At recess, David approached her. He shouldn't have. Bailiffs tensed immediately, but he waved them off with the arrogance of a man who still believed rules bent for him. He leaned close enough that she could smell the faint trace of his cologne, that expensive, controlled scent he always wore. You think you've won? His voice was low, venomous. You think leaking scraps makes you powerful? They'll turn on you next. The press always does. Claire held his gaze, unflinching. Maybe, but you'll already be ashes by then. For the first time she saw it. Fear. Not panic, not rage, but the cold, sinking knowledge that his control was slipping. And she drank it in. The days blurred into a media frenzy. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs, "No one above the law," and Hallstrom Deller corruption. Allies who once toasted David at galas now released statements condemning him. His charity board resigned en masse. Politicians denied knowing him, though photos of them laughing beside him at fundraisers plastered every front page. Claire walked among the crowd one night, unnoticed in her coat and hat. She watched strangers chant his name not in adoration but in anger. The sound filled her chest, a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow. She hadn't wanted fame. She hadn't wanted war. All she'd ever wanted was safety. Now finally, she could taste it. The verdict came not in the courtroom, but in the silence afterward. One evening, Claire stood at her window with Michael asleep behind her. She watched the lights of the city flicker as breaking news scrolled across her phone. David Hallstrom indicted on multiple counts of racketeering, bribery, and fraud. Bail revoked. Assets frozen. The footage showed him being led away in handcuffs, his jaw tight, his suit rumpled for the first time she'd ever seen. No words. No grand speeches. Just the clang of a cell door sealing shut. Claire turned off the TV, no champagne. No cheers, just silence, her revenge. Days later, Jack called. She almost ignored the ringing, but something in her, curiosity, maybe pity, made her answer. "Claire," his voice rasped. "It's over." "You did it." "No," she said softly. "We didn't, you gave up." "I didn't," he exhaled, a sound full of regret. "I was wrong." "Yes," she said. And then she hung up. Life didn't return to normal. How could it? But it settled. The trial wound down. The appeals began. The media frenzy shifted to the next scandal. Claire shielded Michael from most of it, though he caught glimpses. One night he asked, "Mom, is the bad man gone?" She stroked his hair, kissed his forehead. "Yes, baby. He's gone." And for the first time in years, she meant it. On a crisp autumn morning, Claire walked Michael to school. The leaves crunched underfoot, golden and red. Other parents chatted about field trips and homework, their laughter easy. She wasn't one of them yet, not fully. But she was closer. As Michael ran ahead to join his friends, she stood at the gate a moment longer, the sun warming her face. There would be scars. There would be whispers. But there was also freedom, and freedom, she realized, didn't roar. It whispered, like the voice of a waitress in a dim restaurant. Don't trust him. This time, she had listened, and she had won. The restaurant hadn't changed. Same dim light filtering through amber glass sconces, same white tablecloths pressed crisp, with the faintest scent of lemon polish in the air, the same low hum of conversations, wine glasses clinking, forks cutting into steak too expensive to justify. But Claire had changed. She sat at a corner table, Michael across from her. He was fidgeting with the menu, his legs swinging beneath the chair. 10 years old now, sharper, bolder. His hair had grown long enough to fall into his eyes, and he kept brushing it back in that absent way kids did. "Can I get the burger?" he asked. Claire smiled. "Yes, and fries." He grinned wide, a flash of the little boy she'd fought so hard for. She exhaled slowly. The last time she'd been here, her stomach had been tight with nerves, her future uncertain. That night had set everything in motion. The billionaire, the ledger, the betrayals, the trial. Now, months after it had all ended, she'd returned. Not for nostalgia, not for closure, just because she wanted to prove she could sit here without fear. The waitress appeared, and Claire recognized her instantly. The same auburn hair tied back, the same tired but watchful eyes. Time had hardly touched her. She smiled politely at Claire as if she were just another customer. Maybe she didn't remember. Or maybe she remembered too well and chose silence. "Ready to order?" the waitress asked. Michael piped up, "Burger, fries, Coke." Claire laughed. "Water for him. Coke later." The waitress scribbled it down, then turned to Claire. "And for you?" "Salmon," Claire said. "No sauce." The waitress nodded, collected the menus, and slipped away. Claire leaned back in her chair, trying to ease the tightness in her chest. She wasn't nervous, at least she told herself she wasn't. But being here was like pressing on an old bruise. The ache lingered, even when the wound had healed. Michael broke the silence. "Mom, can I ask something?" "Always," he hesitated. Did you hate him, Mr. Hallstrom?" Her breath caught. Out of the mouths of children, always the hardest questions. "I hated what he did," she said carefully. "I hated how he tried to make me small, how he thought he could take you away from me. But him," she thought of David's smile, his rage, the handcuffs, the silence of his downfall. She thought of how many nights she had wondered if she had been the fool, if the whisper had come too late. "I don't hate him," she said finally. Hating him would mean he still matters. And he doesn't. Not anymore. Michael studied her face, then nodded. His acceptance was quiet, absolute. The food arrived, plates steaming, fries stacked golden. Michael dove in, ketchup smeared across his chin. For a moment, it was blissfully ordinary. Just a mother and son sharing dinner. The nightmare behind them. Then Claire noticed the couple at the next table. A young woman, maybe late 20s, nervous in a dress a little too formal. Across from her sat a man in a tailored suit, watch glinting under the dim light. His smile was too practiced, his laugh too rehearsed. Claire knew the scene by heart. The waitress approached them, refilling water glasses. She leaned down, her voice soft, almost lost under the clatter of silverware. But Claire heard it. She always would. "Don't trust him," the waitress whispered. The young woman froze, eyes flicking between the waitress and the man across from her. The man didn't notice. He was too busy scrolling through his phone, feigning distraction. Claire's pulse quickened. For a moment she was back there, her own hands shaking, her world about to tilt into chaos. Michael noticed her stillness. "Mom, what is it?" She forced herself to smile. "Nothing. Just remembering something." The young woman at the next table glanced around nervously, fingers twisting her napkin. She looked at Claire for just a heartbeat, as if searching for confirmation. Claire considered it. She could lean over, say something, warn her. But what would it change? Some lessons couldn't be handed over like lifelines. They had to be chosen, lived. Instead, Claire met her gaze, steady and calm, and gave the faintest nod. Not warning, not instruction, just solidarity. The woman's shoulders eased. She turned back to her companion, her smile thin, her eyes sharper now. The cycle would continue. There would always be men like David, always whispers, always choices. But Claire had broken free. Later, walking home, Michael held her hand. The city buzzed around them. Neon lights reflecting in puddles, horns blaring, strangers rushing past. "You're smiling," Michael said. "I am? Yeah, you don't do that much anymore." She laughed softly. "Maybe I should," he grinned. "You should." That night, after Michael was tucked in, Claire stood at the window watching the city breathe. She thought of everything she'd lost: time, innocence, trust. But also what she'd gained: freedom, resilience, a future she'd carved with blood and silence. Her trauma hadn't vanished. It lived in her bones, in the shadows of memory, but it no longer defined her. She was not the frightened woman who once believed a billionaire could save her. She was not the pawn in someone else's empire. She was a mother, a survivor. And when she closed her eyes, she didn't hear David's voice anymore. She heard her own. Weeks later, she passed the restaurant again. She didn't stop, didn't peer through the windows. She simply walked by, Michael's laughter echoing ahead of her. The whisper belonged to someone else now. Her story was finished.